So what happens at the top of the pyramid?
Exactly. Let's talk about the top of the pyramid. The top of the pyramid is the weird place where the magic happens. Again, survival, succeed, transform. How do you create a self-actualized customer experience? Well, first of all, when I try to talk about this, I start saying, well, who are these companies that do it? Because when I start talking about who those companies are, or start helping people come up with those companies in their own mind, they're able to see that these companies are transformative in their industries. So these are people like Apple, Harley-Davidson. I love the example of there are 25,000 people in America who have a Harley-Davidson logo tattooed on their body. That company's doing something right if they have 25,000 customers and some non-customers who just want the logo because it sends a message to the people about who they are. So Southwest Airlines, Whole Foods Markets, the people who are buying Priuses. There's a lot of companies out there that have created experiences that are so unique and compelling that their customers become the evangelists for the product. So how do you do that? First of all, the idea of meeting unrecognized needs means that, in essence, the company understands what you need better than you do. Now that's pretty provocative. That means you're a mind reader. You're actually thinking about what it is that the customer needs and then figuring out how to create a product for that. Now, Steve Jobs did that brilliantly in creating the iPod initially, which is the iPod was the next generation after the Sony Walkman. Now, if Sony had been smart, they would have said, well, mobile music. That's what the Walkman was. It was mobile music. The next thing should have been Sony creating the iPod. Well, they didn't, but Steve Jobs did. And then obviously from the iPod we got iPhone.
But as importantly, wasn't that a good example of Sony being really good at doing something specific, which was building DVD players or CD players? And they became better and better at building CD players and more sophisticated and missed the bigger picture of a transition to a different...
Abraham Maslow, if the only tool you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. They got myopic. And so, and then Apple came along and just basically ruined the Walkman business overnight. Happens a lot. Happens more today than it did 30 years ago because there's a lot more innovation today, a lot more competition. So what you have to do is figure out what are the ways you actually do that mind reading. So there's 4 key themes that I talk about in this chapter of the book, and I'll just run through them real quickly if you want me to. First of all, the best example, and people get real quickly, is when a company helps you feel like you're able to express yourself better. Now, I mean, Harley-Davidson's a great example of that. The fact that people will put a tattoo on themselves and consider them a Harley person means that they're a little bit of an adventurous rebel. And there are people who are 52-year-old accountants from Poughkeepsie, New York, who think of themselves as a adventurous rebel because they have a Harley. So whether Apple users in the early days, I mean, today there's so many Apple users, it's less of an issue. But there was a time when Apple users thought of themselves as being different and unique and special. In our Joie de Vivre hotels, the fact that we create these hotels and we create an experience where people actually have what we call an identity refreshment, that by actually staying in the hotel, it felt like I was staying in my perfect habitat, and that the personality of the hotel almost rubbed off on me. That is, again, a way of people helping to express themselves through using the product.
So is this that identity refreshment that you're speaking?
You want me to talk about that?
Yes.
Yeah, let me talk about that. I mean, every time we create a boutique hotel, we come up with a magazine that defines the hotel. And the reason we started doing that 22 years ago with that first hotel, the Phoenix, which is a rock and roll hotel, was we realized that in creating a holistic product, magazine publishing and boutique hotels have something in common. They're very niche-oriented and they're very aspirational and lifestyle-oriented. So in creating that first hotel, we decided Rolling Stone would be our touchstone for the product. So everything we did in creating the decor of the product, the staff, the kind of service that we offered, had to come down to 5 words that we thought as adjectives defined Rolling Stone. Funky, irreverent, adventurous, cool, and young at heart. And everything we did had to come back to that. What we learned with time was that the people who fell in love with the hotel were people who actually thought of themselves as funky, cool, irreverent, adventurous, and young at heart. And they got their identity refreshed by staying there. So they didn't just have a lodging experience, they had an identity refreshment beyond that. So we were able to charge a premium relative to the hotel across the street because we were offering more than just a lodging experience. So in some ways we were meeting an unrecognized need. and we were actually helping people to express themselves.
So each of the hotels now have a
every one of the hotels has a different magazine, and that's part of the fun of actually concepting them, is figuring out what's the magazine and the 5 adjectives. So, so that's a way for people to express themselves.
Okay.
So that's number 1. Number 2 is helping in the purchase of the product, you feel like you're actually supporting a higher cause than just you. Prius, perfect example of that. You mean I can buy a car and save the planet at the same time? Those who were buying Priuses in the early days before the gas went through the roof. I mean, today a lot of people buy the Prius for functional reasons more than anything. But a lot of the people initially bought it because it was meeting an unrecognized need of theirs. Like, I want to actually have a car, but I want to feel good about having a car. So that was a good example. Patagonia. If you want to go check out a website that shows just how evangelical the customers can be if they feel like they're supporting something, go to Patagonia.com, the clothing company, the retailer, and look at their manufacturer of clothing too. And look at their website, because they have these people who I call Patagoniacs. They're the people that are the maniacs who love Patagonia, partly because they like how to use the product. The product's sort of an outdoor clothing product. But they like it also because the fact that since 1985, Patagonia has given 1% of their, not their profits, but their revenues to environmental organizations. And it's a very, the company does a lot of great things for the environment. So way before it became more cool in the last 5 to 10 years. And so that's another example. We know Ben & Jerry's and the Body Shop, lots of good examples of that out there of how companies can actually create that sense of evangelical customers because they meet that higher need piece that people would like. Third way to do it is actually delivering on a higher goal you have, that you just have created something that helps you get there easier. Google does that with internet searches. Nike did that with their Just Do It campaign. You mean I can actually be a jock, even though I didn't think of myself as one? Nike sort of helped people there. Finally, the fourth way to get there is to create a product that people hadn't even imagined. I used FedEx as an example earlier. That's a good example, like an overnight package. The Geek Squad is one that I sometimes use because the Geek Squad, they created a theatrical experience of having your computer fixed. So how you address any of those 4 themes is how you can help mind read your customer to the point of actually giving them something they hadn't even asked for. I'd like to close by just saying my favorite quote on this is from Henry Ford. Henry Ford, who created the Model T, sort of created the American automobile industry. He said, if I'd asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. And that's really gets to the idea that at the top of the pyramid for the customer, if you ask your customer what they want, they won't even be able to tell you. And so the companies that get it right, and the visionaries who get it right, and the business leaders who are able to execute on this, are those who actually can imagine what the customer wants before the customer even asks for it.